we start with the topic of ECG. Now, ECG, we start with the image of Einthoven. Einthoven is the first person in whose credit the correct technology of recording the ECG and understanding ECG is there. Now, before going to the subject of the ECG, it's quite important to have some idea about the physiology of the heart contractions, how the electrical changes occur in the muscles and how it is producing the effect. Then only you will be able to understand the basic idea of the ECG and interpret it properly. Now, any muscle, rather any living cell would have a potential difference across its cell membrane. That's what we call as a potential, membrane potential. And it's always like in the resting condition, there will be a relatively positive charge outside and negative charge inside. That's the usual physiology of life. Now, we always keep our positive these impressions outside. The negatives should be kept inside. Anyway, but in case of excitable tissues of the nerves and the muscles, these are the excitable tissues, these membrane potential can change temporarily and to produce an action, and that's what we call as the action potential. This process is called as depolarizing process. So due to, in case of the muscles, due to a stimulus from outside, the temporarily the potential difference changes, the positive charges they move in and the negative charges move out, and that condition is called as the stage of depolarization, and that produces a current wave. And this current wave produced over the cell membrane will produce the changes in the elastic components of the muscles, the actin and myosin, and they produce the mechanical contraction. So the important is the facts which you have to remember is when there is a current activity, the current activity is due to the depolarization, there will be a current potential produced, and then again it comes back to the normal state, and this phase is called as the depolarization, and the process of again coming back to the normal state is the repolarization, and this acts as a sudden wave, a short wave, and the duration of this is quite short, usually in milliseconds. To translate that electrical activity into a mechanical contraction, there will be some lag period. See, electrical activity occurs at this time period, but the mechanical contraction, that the sliding of the actin and myosin fibers, it starts slightly later, and the contraction occurs continuously for a longer period. And for the mechanical effect, like the muscles to come back to its original stage in terms of the relaxation or the tone of the muscle, it takes much longer time. Now, this period is what we call as a refractory period. The difference between the electrical activity and the mechanical relaxation is what we call as the refractory period. Now, in case of skeletal muscles, the impulses will reach to the muscles at a faster rate, and before the refractory period is over, then there would be, before the mechanical refractory period is over, there would be another stimulus, and this produces a sustained contraction, which you call as a tetanic contraction. This effect of summation of these mechanical events is called as the Treppe effect. And in skeletal muscles, which are striated muscles, for each of these action potential to start, there needs to be an external stimulus. And because there is a need of external stimulus, it's called as the voluntary activity. Where because of your voluntary activity, through the nerves, the impulse has to reach to the muscles, then when the muscles can contract. And this keeps the whole contraction can keep as a sustained contraction as such. Whereas in the smooth muscles, the difference is smooth muscles, they do not require an external stimulus to start with the action potential. Once the action potential starts, the depolarization occurs, and the depolarization event is comparatively longer. It takes a longer time, almost the same as that of the mechanical contraction. That's the basic one difference between the smooth muscles and the skeletal muscles. In the smooth muscles, the changes which occur, the depolarization which occur would be longer. And the mechanical contraction, of course, it almost, not exactly, almost at the same interval. So the refractory period is shorter, comparatively much shorter. And for another contraction, there is no need of an external stimulus. It can just have a spontaneity. The spontaneity is spontaneously, again, once the depolarization occurs, then again there could be a depolarization. Whereas in skeletal muscles, a second depolarization can occur only when there is an external stimulus. Whereas in a smooth muscle of like gastrointestinal tract, etc., there is no need of an external stimulus. It occurs spontaneously, and that rate of spontaneity can vary from muscle to muscle, as well as the rate of flow spontaneity also can change according to the physiological conditions like electrolyte situations, hormonal status, etc. Now, in case of heart muscles, the situation is slightly different. Heart muscles, they have certain characters of the skeletal muscles because they are striated, and at the same time they have certain characters of the smooth muscles even, and hence the cardiac muscles, they are of a different category. The functions, of course, there is a mix of both these. And another quite important is heart muscles are connected to each other. Each muscle fiber is connected to each other through a disc, which we call as intercalated disc. Intercalated disc is a connection between one fiber and the other fiber. In skeletal muscles, each fiber is connected to a nerve ending and it contracts independently. In smooth muscles, the spontaneity is decided by the external environmental factors, whereas in case of the heart muscles, the muscle cells are connected to each other by an intercalated disc, which can allow or transmit the signals or these action potentials from one cell to the other, and hence a group of heart muscle cells, they can act as a single cell functionally. They can act as a single cell functionally in the sense the same action potential can transmit through the whole bundle of muscles, not a single muscle fiber, and hence heart muscles also are called as syncytial muscles. The other name used is syncytial muscles are suggesting about that condition. These muscle cells, they can function as a single cell. Now, the action potential formed in case of the heart muscle is almost similar to that of the smooth muscle cells, in the sense there is a spontaneity, the rate and the time taken for the depolarization is much longer than the skeletal muscle. So it has a property of both the smooth muscle as well as a skeletal muscle to a certain extent. The action potential occurs due to exchange of the ions, and the ions would be mainly in case of the once the electrical activity starts, the sodium and potassium molecules, ions, will be exchanged across the cell membrane, and this will result in the flow of calcium ion in the centromeres, in the central endoplasmic structures, and the calcium ion acts as a lock between the actin and myosin and keeps the actin and actin myosin close together, and hence the contraction occurs. So muscle contraction occurs mainly. Now when I say this calcium, the calcium is the main, it's not the only one. Mainly the calcium ion, which is responsible for the stage contraction of the muscle, the mechanical contraction, whereas sodium and potassium is mainly responsible for the electrical activity. So when I say this sodium and potassium and calcium being different, that doesn't mean that they are totally different. There is a close relationship, and it's not only these factors, there are multiple factors. But for practical purposes, we consider sodium and potassium as the electrolytes responsible for the electrical activity, calcium the mainly responsible ion for the mechanical activity. This is for the practical consideration, but it's not a complete description. Anyway, the issue is because the refractory period and the electrical activity is almost similar, there cannot be this tetanic contraction. There cannot be a summation in both skeletal the heart muscles as well as the smooth muscles. Another action potential will not be formed before the mechanical relaxation occurs, and hence a tetanic contraction is not possible in normal resting conditions. Whereas in a skeletal muscle, because the gap between the mechanical effect and the electrical effect is quite huge, A repeated electrical contractions can result in summation as a summation of the mechanical contraction, and a tetanic contraction can occur. So tetanic contraction means a sustained contraction, whereas the when there is non-tetanic contractions, the contractions will be alternating, relaxed, and the contractions occur. So hence there would be a pulsatile activity. The heart muscles as well as the smooth muscles elsewhere, they would have a pulsatile activity. In heart muscles, there will be a pulsatile activity. Now, heart muscles would have, when I say heart muscles, I said there will be innumerable number of muscle cells, and they are arranged in a form of syncytial arrangement. And this syncytial arrangement also has a specific pattern, and that specific pattern is due to the having the difference in the conductivity and difference in the rate of contraction. The muscles which are located in the atrium, just at the base of aorta, which we call as SA node or sinoatrial node area. Now, when I say sinoatrial node, the sinoatrial node is not an anatomical structure. You cannot just identify a sinoatrial node in a sample of heart muscle or heart asset, the specimen of heart in the museum. You cannot demonstrate sinoatrial node as such, as an anatomical structure. It's simply a functional entity. The only issue is the muscle cells at this area, they are more excitable in the sense their refractory period is much shorter than the muscle cells elsewhere. And hence, the rate of contraction of these muscle cells at the SA node area is high, and it's at the range of around 72 per minute. But once the impulse starts, the impulse moves along the intercalated discs of the muscles in the atrial muscles throughout, and hence the conduction of the impulses occurs throughout. And in between the atrium and the ventricle, there is again a bad conductor. It doesn't, the impulses do not move from the atrial muscles to the ventricular muscles directly, but they move only through a specific nodular structure which we call as a AV node. Now, this AV node also is a functional entity. You cannot just demonstrate it anatomically. It's a functional entity where the rate of conduction is gradually diminishing from SA node to atrial muscles to the AV node. And then the conduction of the impulses flows through a specific direction which you call as a bundle of His. And it's quite important whether it's the heart of the lady or the man, it's named as bundle of His only. So in the heart, it's His bundle which is important. Now anyway, and then it moves upwards towards the ventricle. Now this kind of a direction of the impulses, or the impulses move in a specific direction, is maintained by the varying rate of the contractions or the excitability of the cells. The excitability of the cells in the SA node, they are quite high, or the refractory period is quite shorter, whereas as it comes down, it becomes lesser and the refractory period becomes longer and longer. So, or rather, it's the other way. If I had to translate it in another way, suppose hypothetically you select this one muscle from the SA node and cultivate it outside and allow it to contract on its own, it will be contracting at a rate of maybe at 72 per minute. Whereas if you take the muscles from the atrial wall and then allow it to contract, it will be contracting at a rate of 68 per minute. If you take the muscle cell from the AV node and then allow it to contract, it will contract at a rate of 63 per minute. Whereas if you take the muscles from the bundle of His, it will be contracting at a rate of 58 per minute. If you take the muscle cells from the ventricular wall and then allow it to contract, it will be contracting at a rate of 50 per minute. Now, that's the spontaneous contraction rate, or what we call as the excitability, is gradually diminishing. And the excitability of the SA node is the maximum. And because the excitability of the SA node is the maximum, SA node acts as a pacemaker. It allows, or it regulates the movement of the action potentials across the heart muscles. So the whole of the heart muscle, the whole syncytial structure, now contracts under the control of the SA node rate. You got it now. See, spontaneous is something different, and under the control is something different. So SA node is the regulator, or rather, it's the deciding factor in normal situations, and the rate of the SA node is the one which decides the rate of contraction of the heart muscles throughout. Suppose in cases of the diseases like AV blocks or so on, suppose you create a block. Now we will be discussing about the block later in detail, but now just for the understanding principle, suppose you create a block and do not allow the impulses starting from the SA node to the AV node reach to the ventricles, and the ventricles will be contracting at a rate which is decided by the spontaneity of the AV node, whereas the atrium will be contracting at the rate which is decided by the spontaneity of the SA node. Like maybe hypothetically, in such a situation where there is a complete atrioventricular block, suppose all the impulses, none of the impulses reach from the SA node to the AV node or beyond that, or do not reach to the ventricles through the AV node, the atrium will be contracting at a rate of 72 per minute, and ventricle will be contracting at a rate of 68 or 64 per minute, and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. Now, suppose in any of the pathological condition, due to some abnormality, we will have that kind of a discussion about which are those causes which produce these also. But you hypothetically for the present, suppose due to some reason, the excitability of the muscle elsewhere other than SA node becomes higher than that of the SA node due to some reasons. Instead of SA node having a rate of 72 per minute, if the rate increases, rate of contraction of somewhere in the atrial muscle is increased beyond 72 per minute, at that situation, heart will now contract at the same rate as that of this focus, which has a maximum excitability. This is what we call as the beats. The ectopic beats do occur due to some situation where the area other than that of the SA node gains a higher excitability rate. More details about the pathology of that, how and why, we will discuss later when we go into more detail. Now, this is just for the basic idea of what we mean by this conduction as such. Now, the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system regulates the heart rate to a certain extent. The parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve, it just regulates the SA node. So when there is a parasympathetic stimulation, the SA node becomes depressed, and hence the excitability of the SA node becomes lesser. And that's why when you give atropine in the OT operation theaters before the surgery, heart rate increases. Atropine blocks the cholinergic activity, so SA node will be free of the parasympathetic stimulus. Whereas the sympathetic stimulation, it increases the excitability of the heart muscles throughout. Now, that's one other important difference. A parasympathetic activity will be directly acting on the SA node. The parasympathetic activity over the heart muscles in the throughout is comparatively lesser. It acts through the SA node. It depresses the SA node, but elsewhere the activity or response of parasympathetic stimulus, cholinergic activity, will be lesser. I don't say nil, but it's lesser. Whereas adrenergic activity, when there is a sympathetic stimulus, it produces the excitability, increases the excitability of the heart muscles throughout all the ventricular atrial muscles. Their excitability will be increased, and hence when the rate of contraction increases under the atropine effect, and rate of contraction occurs due to some sympathetic stimulus like the exercise, etc. Though the rate may be same, but the effect will be different. The effect will be different because under the atropine effect, when the rate increases, the whole of the heart muscle, every syncytial structure is maintained, and the synchronization of the impulses is maintained. Whereas if there is a sympathetic activity and the rate increases, there is a chance that it's not that it's a rule, there is a chance that some area, somewhere in the heart area, may get an excitability more than its surrounding area or more than the SA node, and it can trigger a ectopic beat. So that's the basic reason, and the reason why atropine is given in all surgical cases as a protective, cardioprotective. The atropine reduces the possibility of these ectopic foci generated over the heart muscles because it frees the heart muscles from the parasympathetic effect and the impact of the sympathetic stimulation can be buffered, it can be reduced. Anyway, that's about the other issue about the conduction of the impulses. Now the pattern of the action potentials formed at these areas, what I have mentioned, is the same. Like there is a difference in the sense excitability of the SA node muscle is quite high. Now this graph shows you the same phenomena which I have discussed earlier. It becomes more excitable, and hence by the time the impulse reaches the ventricular muscles, the SA node muscles, they would be completing their action potential and they will be again repolarized. The depolarization is over and repolarization is over. And as the conduction of the impulses occurs throughout, and by the time it reaches the ventricular muscles, the process of this depolarization and apolarization, this repolarization of the atrial muscles, SA node, will be completed, and the ventricles will start later. So this time gap is important. As a result of this, the summary of total, you look at the summary of the electrical activity produced by the heart muscles. You will have a wave because of the contraction of the, or maybe the depolarization of the atrial muscles, and then followed by another wave of the depolarization of the ventricular muscles. And conventionally, we will have more discussion about these waves, naming, and so on later. But conventionally, in the ECG recording, you will have the P wave, QRS complex, and T waves. P wave suggests about the activity of the atrial muscles. Now, when I say this atrial muscle activity, this also is not a smooth or a single activity. SA node has a higher excitability, and then gradually the atrial muscles will have gradually reducing excitability. So by the time it reaches the AV node, the current produced will be of a heterogeneous pattern. Heterogeneous pattern in the sense the SA node, the current produced much earlier, and it takes some time before it reaches AV node, and hence the current produced, though each action potential is a sharp event, the net current produced is not sharp. Instead, it's presented as a wave. Now, these variations of the wave and how they will be interpreted, this is another topic which we will discuss later in pathology. Now, this is about understanding the concept. So, for the basics, this is enough. Whereas, when the current moves in the ventricular bundles, it starts from the bundle of His, moves to the interventricular septum. So, the direction of the current move is downwards initially. Then the ventricular muscles will be activated, and hence the current moves upwards. So the current movement of the current in case of the ventricles will be bidirectional, essentially bidirectional. Initially, it will be in the direction of the interventricular septum, and then it moves across the ventricular muscles up. And hence, the wave produced will be always biphasic. There will be a sharp downwards and then sharp upwards. And again, the directions, the patterns of these waves at a different lead system and so on, we will be discussing later. But this wave would be of a pattern where you will have two waves, and hence this is conventionally named as a QRS complex. A QR wave and RS waves, QR and RS waves, they suggest about these two events together. Now, after this event, there will be a repolarization. This depolarization results in repolarization. During repolarization, there will be a potential difference between the ventricular muscles and the atrial muscles. Atrial muscles will be in a neutral state. There will be no activity, whereas the depolarization activity will be continuing in the ventricles. This results in a movement of the current across, and this is what we call as the T wave. So, conventionally, when we use the term P, Q, RS and G cut terminology, it represents these events which occur. And the reason for these events is the gradual flow of the current across heart muscles, and because of that specific pattern. Now, in summary, because we are able to have this kind of a perception, any changes in these can be interpreted as some disease entity. That's the basis of the ECG asset. Now, The time also is an important factor. The time taken for the conduction of the impulses from the SA node to the AB node, this is represented by what we call as the PR interval. The starting of the P wave and till it reaches to the ventricles and ventricular contraction starts or ventricular depolarization starts, that stage is the time taken for the conduction of impulse. So we can record the time as such. Or the time taken for the action potentials reaching or depolarization of the whole ventricular muscle or ventricular activation time, VAT, is the time taken for the QRS complex. That QRS complex represents the time taken for that. Then the ST segment, the ST QRS interval, or this is also called as VAT or ventricular activation time. From the S point is end of the depolarization of the ventricles to the repolarization, complete repolarization of the ventricles. That forms the ST segment. So you will have in an ECG, you will have a pattern of studying of the waves, usually P, Q, RS, and T waves, and then you will have the intervals, the PQ interval, QRS interval or ventricular activation time, ST segment or ST interval. These are the basics of what we study in the ECG asset. Now, to have this kind of a standardization, the pattern, the ECG is conventionally recorded on a graph paper. And see, now all these would be standardized because of a standardized pattern. Historically, in the history of, if you go into the electrical activity history of the heart and then its recording, there were many these differences in these approaches. The type of graph paper and all that were of different pattern, and hence, and even the nomenclature of the waves also were different. There were some conventions where the waves were named as A, B, C, D, and so on. But now, universally, it's standardized. Like the ECG has to be recorded on a standard set type of paper, and it should be recorded at a specific speed, and this gives you the standardization pattern. So in general, throughout now when we record the ECG is recorded at a specific type of the paper, and this is what was the ECG graph paper. And that ECG graph paper, you will have the lines, I think all of you have seen the lines which mark about 5 segments of finer lines and then one segment of thicker line, and this represents the time factor when it is run on a uniform speed of 25 millimeters per second. So to have a proper recording, your recording paper as well as the machine should be of proper condition. The speed of movement of the paper also is quite important, and when the paper moves at a uniform speed, each of these finer segment, that the fine line gap, it represents 0.04 second, whereas the gap between the two thicker lines represents 0.20 seconds. So you have a basic idea of recording this time interval, and then it can be applied to the ECG asset. Now, whatever we have discussed in the beginning as the wave pattern and the segments, the time interval pattern, now in relation to the ECG paper, it can be identified. Like when you draw this wave over the ECG paper, you can measure the time of that PR interval by counting these numbers of these finer segments, and the QRS also by counting this number as it. At the same time, the amplitude of the current, how much is the current produced, this also needs to be standardized, and standardization by making a movement of the stellate of the ECG machine to move 1 centimeter for 1 millivolt. Now, when you have seen the ECG machine in the part, there is one standardization button. Before you record the ECG, a calibration button has to be pressed to see whether the deflection of the stellate is 1 centimeter for 1 millivolt or not. When you press the calibration button, it gives a 1 millivolt current, and it should be, the stellate should be moving only 1 centimeter. That's this thicker segment, one box up and down. So 1 centimeter in the sense this one segment, whole of that one segment is the distance it should be covered. So that now we have a possibility of recording the amplitude of the current as well as recording the time interval taken for the movement of the current. So the only two information which we get from the ECG is only these: the amplitude of the current produced at a different cardiac cycle, as well as time taken for the different time factors taken for conduction of the impulses at different issues. Now, these two information has to be interpreted in terms of the possible disease entity. And this again is possible only when you have a perfect standardization of all the factors together. So when we say ECG recording, every factor, like the lead system, of course, we will be discussing the details of the lead system, like different patterns of the lead system, why and how, and what's the rationale between that in the coming sessions. And the lead systems, as well as the environment where you record the ECG, the status of the patient during the recording, every factor counts a lot. And because the ECG machine is a highly sensitive electronic machine, there can be an electronic aberration due to this current waves produced in the exterior also. They also have to be neutralized. So all these factors have to be considered. And as I told you, the major factors which you have to study would be about these waves: P, QRS complex wave, T wave, and the segments. The important segments are time intervals are PR interval and PR segment. Now, PR interval is these are standard nomenclatures. When we say PR interval, it's the time taken from the beginning of the P wave to the beginning of the QRS. PR segment, that represents end of the P wave to the beginning. Now, these kinds of nomenclatures also are quite significant, because otherwise there can be misinterpretation if you do not know about this. These nomenclatures are conventional and there is no other reason. So when you say PR interval, it's actually the time taken for the generation of the impulse at the SA node till it reaches to the AV node. And when we say PR segment, it's the time taken for the conduction of the impulses from the atrial muscles to the AV node, and for the AV node to get activated to produce the current as such. And then QT interval is the time taken for a complete depolarization and repolarization of the ventricular muscles, whereas the QRS interval or QRS complex is the ventricular activation time. ST segment represents the time taken for the repolarization. So these are all conventional terminology which should not be misinterpreted. That segment and interval word often can be confusing, but it has to be understood properly. Interval and segment, these ST segment, QT interval, these terms should not be confused. Otherwise, when you read the books often, it can produce a confusion. Now, there is another issue. When we say the QRS complex, you will always have some confusion, like because of the different patterns of the recording, you will have some confusion, like which is the Q point and which is the R point and so on. The convention is the lowest point is the Q complex point and the highest point is the R point. And the one point which is seen at the end is the S, or end of the terminal, end of the wave. Like, see, you may have, it's not normal. Now, all these waves and their abnormalities and their rationality we will discuss later. Now, this is only for hypothetical example. Suppose you have a wave where only there is a downward wave, then there will be an absence of the R wave. This is hypothetical. Practically, these are all the issues which we will be discussing later when we discuss the pathology. So don't conclude that there will be a situation where you will have no R wave at all in a practical living condition. But this is hypothetical. Suppose you have a wave where it's only a downward movement, then you say that there is no R wave, it's only QS. Suppose in the other way, it is only an upward wave and a downward wave is not there, then it's a R wave only. There is no Q and S points. But practically this won't occur. But I have just put in these points just to highlight about the convention of naming these points. The lowest point is the Q point and the highest point is the R point. If there is no lower point again at the end of this action potential or Q, then we will not use the word S complex, or S point is not mentioned. S point is not mentioned. So we just say QR point. But of course, you will have the QRS interval, but S point is not noted in the ECG. This is not to confuse you, but these are all the conventional issues which can produce the confusions, and that's why I have stressed upon. Whereas in a standard wave, you will have standard ECG and usual. You will have a Q wave or Q point where it's there will be a depression from that baseline. Now, when we record the ECG, when there is no electrical activity in the heart muscle, it's a uniform flat line, and it's called as a baseline. So when there is a slight depression from the baseline, that point is called as Q point, and then the highest point is the R point, and then another depression produced at the end is the S point. So these are all the conventional nomenclatures of these points. Of course, these do not make much sense in interpreting the pathology, but from the academic point of view, these also are significant. Now, so measuring these QRS intervals, now for all practical purposes, when you do not have this Q wave and R wave, how to measure these intervals? That's the point. Suppose you do not have a Q point and S point, and then the measuring the QRS interval will start from that point where the wave starts from the baseline. So this will be 0.08 seconds. Whereas if you have a typical Q point and S point, again the measuring is not from this Q point to the S point, but measuring from that point where the baseline has started. So in this case, it will be 0.12 seconds. In sense, it has three segments, three fine lines. Each one fine line is 0.04 seconds. So you can measure the time as QRS interval in the first graph. I hope you are able to follow what I mean to say. Now, these are all basic issues which should be understood properly. Measuring this time is an important factor. Or similarly, there can be some confusion about a J point. Like suppose the line produced at the end of this S segment, it's much higher than that of the baseline, then it's called as a J wave or a J point, which produces a electrical activity, sustained electrical activity, even after the repolarization of the ventricle. Even after the depolarization of the ventricle, before the repolarization occurs, there is a sustained electrical activity which either lifts the baseline up or shifts the baseline down, and both these are called as the J points or J waves as such. So this is also another of the terminology which is often used. Now, again, whatever we have already discussed, summary of what we have discussed is what these intervals mean. P wave is the sequential activation or depolarization of the right and left atrium. QRS complex is the right and left ventricular depolarization. ST to T wave is the ventricular depolarization. U wave is, of course, when there is a wave produced even after the T wave. This is, I have not mentioned, referred to that U wave in the images. Suppose there is an abnormal wave even after the T wave, that's called as a U wave, which is called as after depolarization. This U wave we will see when we discuss about the pathology. Then PR interval is the time interval for the onset of atrial depolarization. As we have already referred to these issues, QRS duration is the ventricular activation time or ventricular muscle depolarization time. QT interval is the duration of ventricular depolarization and repolarization. Now, RR interval is the duration between the two ventricular cardiac cycles. So that's about certain basic issues. The next point which we discuss would be the Einthoven's triangle, Einthoven principle, and how the ECG is going to the level of interpretation of the ECG in the next session. If there are any questions, we'll answer that question and then conclude. Time is up. I think there are no questions now.
No, sir.
Right, okay. Then we'll conclude today. We'll conclude in the continue next session. Okay, fine.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.